Happy Seahawks bye weekend, everyone. I'm Mookie Alexander, managing editor for SB Nation's Field Goals, back with another crudely made video for you. It's getting a little late in the evening here. That's why the light is on above me. Now, with the Seahawks off this week, I figured it's time to do another Q&A with the Field Goals community. So on Thursday, I believe it was, I asked for some questions in the comments section. You provided those questions, and I picked which ones that I wanted to answer. And again, these aren't meant to be massive diatribes. So we should be up out of here in 40 minutes, give or take a couple minutes. So let's not waste any time here. Let's get to it right away with the first question as I pull up the Google slide here. Burleson18 writes, who are the Seahawks bringing in to kick the tires during the bye? Randy Gregory, Hakeem Hicks. So, of course, this was asked before Randy Gregory went from waived by the Broncos to evidently traded to the San Francisco 49ers for some late round draft picks. So San Francisco gets another pass rusher, although I think the idea of Randy Gregory versus the actual player and his productivity are on different paths. But anyway, will the Seahawks bring in anybody like a veteran player who's unsigned at the moment? So Hakeem Hicks or Ndamukong Suh or somebody else? I don't think so. I don't think there's a need to right now. I think the Seahawks are generally happy with their depth at the moment, and they're going to get some players back after the bye. So you think about wide receiver, Derek Young could come back from IR. He's eligible to be activated off of it next week. They could get Kenny McIntosh back from IR as well if you want to boost the running back group even more. On the defensive side of the ball, I can only think that you would want depth at two places. Linebacker, middle linebacker, meaning beyond Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks and Devin Bush, there's not a whole lot there in terms of even barely provable depth. Everybody else like Drake Thomas and John Radigan, they've either not played any defensive snaps for the Seahawks yet, or they've played very few snaps in the case of Radigan, who finally got some garbage time minutes last week against the Giants. And then on the defensive line, it has to be get another pass rusher, get another interior lineman. They could get another interior lineman, that's for sure, for somebody like they're cheap, but don't expect a big name or anything like that. There is some caution as far as the depth there, especially the fact that Jaron Reed has been playing through a groin injury, and then he hurt his shin in the Giants game. And then you get to Mario Edwards and Cameron Young. It's not a super stacked group in terms of nose tackles and defensive ends, and Brian Monet is not coming back anytime soon. But until something catastrophic happens, I think the Seahawks are going to stand pats. They don't really need to add another pass rusher. It'd be kind of weird saying that after they recorded 11 sacks and then had a bunch of pressures against Carolina. But just keep the youth movement going. You got Boye Mafe, you've got Chenna Nwosu, you got Derek Hall, you got Darrell Taylor, who's pretty much a situational pass rusher at this point. Again, Seattle is probably content at those positions, so there's no real need to go signing anybody right now. Now we get to Gabriel D'Souza. Is the defense really getting better, or the bad play of Daniel Jones in the Giants' offense gave us false hope? Probably a little bit of both. I think the Seahawks defense is getting better. Certainly a lot better than what we saw on opening day against the Rams and through, say, the first half against the Detroit Lions. But the Giants' offense is abysmal. And that's whether Saquon Barkley is there or not. Because don't forget, they've had plenty of ineffective games with Saquon in the lineup. I mean, they got shut out with Saquon in the lineup on opening day against the Cowboys. So just a little perspective there. But as far as the Seahawks defense, I think the addition of Devin Witherspoon has changed a lot of things for the way that Clint Hurts wants to run this defense, and I guess Pete Carroll by extension, because it is his defense after all. He's a revelation. And the fact that the Seahawks have got corners like Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon who can play at a high level, and Witherspoon's already playing at a high level this quickly, he's going to have some bad games. It's going to happen. He's a rookie. It happens to everybody. But the fact that they have two exciting young corners like that, I think it totally changes the way Carroll can run this defense and Hurt can run this defense compared to previous years where it felt like the main reason they were playing so conservatively and guys are like 10, 15 yards off the line of scrimmage and giving guys cushions is that they were afraid of their own corners. That would mean Trey Flowers or even occasionally Shaquille Griffin. And you get the general idea. They just didn't have the high-end cornerback talent required to run the defense that Pete generally wants to run. So the pass rush is very interesting because beyond the fact that the Giants' offensive line was pure Swiss cheese. I mean, that was worse than any Tom Cable-led offensive line here in Seattle. But beyond the Giants' offensive line being bad, and even beyond the Panthers' offensive line being bad, I like the way that the pass rush looks, and the interior line has really surprised me, especially Jaron Reed at nose tackle. He looks reborn, in fact, and he has been a major reason why the Seahawks' run defense has been stout so far. Eventually, they'll run into better rushing offenses, and that'll be the real test of how much they've improved. But they're not just letting anybody rush for 150 or 200 like they were last year. So you have Reed, you have Mario Edwards. Great signing by John Schneider, the typical cheap, low cost, high reward, high value signing that he's capable of at his best. And Edwards has been a menace both against the run and against the pass. Draymond Jones took a little bit to get going, but because of the performances of Reed and Edwards, I think that's benefited Jones as well. So you have those three, and we'll get to Cameron Young a little later on, but interior line, really good so far, especially these last couple of weeks. And then on the edges, Mafe, that second-year leap looks to be real. The sacks will come. He got his first last week. I think that was his first of the season, but whatever the case, he had a sack and he had multiple pressures that led to sacks for other players. So he's been the ideal two-way edge rusher, somebody who can set the edge against the run and get after the quarterback. Even if it doesn't end in a sack, at least get a pressure, get him off the spot. So you have the young talent there, Derek Hall, pretty much forced to turn over by Daniel Jones because that Quandre Diggs pick was a direct result of Hall's late pressure. So you have him, you have the linebackers with Jordan Brooks doing a hell of a job, really off of his torn ACL to play at this level, and then Bobby Wagner. Look, Bobby, he is still very, very valuable against the run, and we see that he's still valuable as a blitzer. He was valuable as a blitzer with the Rams last year, and he continues to be effective against the quarterback as a pass rusher. That part of his game hasn't gone away. As far as his pass coverage down the field, it's not as airtight as it used to be, but it's not a fatal flaw, at least not at the moment. And then you get to the secondary. I mentioned the corners already, but Quandre Diggs and Julian Love and Jamal Adams, that's still a work in progress, I guess, because we haven't seen all three healthy at the same time for longer than 9 plays. So hopefully Adams does come back after the bye. Julian Love had a slow start, admittedly, but he played quite well against the Giants, and he played better in the second half against Carolina. And then Quandre Diggs, he certainly divides a lot of opinion among Seahawks fans that, oh, he misses tackles, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. Certainly not the greatest tackler in the world, I will admit, but I can't stay mad at Quandre pretty much ever. I love his personality, I love his style of play, and he's not getting targeted a ton. So sometimes the best thing for a safety is to not see him on the field getting targeted. If plays are not going his way, if the deep middle is closed off, like it has been generally for the last couple of seasons, then the safeties are doing their job. So that's just something to put into perspective. So the Seahawks, I think, will get a better gauge of their offense when they play Baltimore, because I don't expect Cincinnati's offense to be high flying for as long as Joe Burrow is injured. Arizona is decent. They're a lot better than expected. Let's be real, with Joshua Dobbs at quarterback. So Arizona's offense could provide a test for the run defense for sure. The Cleveland Browns offense is hit and miss whether Deshaun Watson's in the lineup or not. But Baltimore, with Lamar Jackson, with Mark Andrews, with Zay Flowers, and just Lamar as a rushing threat too, that's a whole lot to deal with. And that'll give us a better gauge of where the Seahawks are. Are they an average defense? Are they really a top 10 defense after all? Are they just a team that can beat up on the dregs of the NFL? If they're an average defense, I'm fine with that. That's a lot better than the below average to outright terrible that we've seen over the past few years. So average, I think you can get away with if the offense can pick itself back up. All right, let's get to the next question here. Sniper, well, I'll go with Sniper, SNPER. A common narrative out there is that Jaxon Smith-Njigba isn't getting deep targets because our O-line is banged up. Is that actually supported by data? And has offensive play calling in general, and his usage specifically, substantially changed between weeks 1 versus weeks 2 and 4? Yeah, my elbow hit the table there, but the offense has definitely changed since Charles Cross and Abe Lucas went down. And John Gilbert already wrote an article about it, so it's up on Field Goals if you want to see it. I highly recommend it because the facts are there. Play action usage has gone up, which is beneficial for the offensive line. You've got more tight end usage, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. Sometimes you're seeing two tight ends lined up in the backfield alongside Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. You don't see that type of formation too often across the league. So Shane Waldron's had to be very creative as far as helping his own linemen out. And even though Storm Forsythe and Jake Curran have done a commendable job, really, in the absence of Cross and Lucas, you don't want them one-on-one on islands all the time. You can't game plan as if you just have Cross and Lucas and Forsythe and Curran are interchangeable. And we saw some of it in the Giants game where Curran got beaten for both sacks by Kayvon Thibodeau. So all the chipping that the tight ends are doing, all the extra help that they are getting, and the fact that Geno is also doing a good job of evading pressure and also not inviting pressure, all that's considered has had an impact on the offense. And then we get to Smith-Njigba specifically. The fact that they're having to go 12 and 13 more often means that Smith-Njigba does lose some snaps, and that the targets that he's getting, these screen passes and these hopeless throws to nowhere, yeah, it's annoying, especially given the training camp hype and the preseason hype that these are his targets the first 4 games of his career. His average depth of target, I believe, is 1.3 yards, which is dismal. But I would give it a little more time, and we're not going to get Lucas back for the Bengals game because they placed him on injured reserve 3 games ago, so he's got to miss the Bengals one. But Cross should be back after the bye. We'll see how it goes with Phil Haynes, and Damian Lewis. But you should get some reinforcements back along the offensive line, and they can slowly but surely reincorporate the offense that they really wanted to run. As far as the stat that gets thrown around, the yards of separation, oh my God, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is getting so much separation per route. Well, context is everything. And if you want to snapshot some of the screen passes that he's been getting, he's technically open by 3-4 yards. It's just that he's not going very far. So that's a lot different to me than if he is streaking open down the middle of the field and Geno's not throwing to him. I haven't seen much from the film heads and other analysts out there to suggest that there are a lot of missed opportunities being left on the field. And even when he has gotten targets a little bit further down the field, they've not been efficient. Geno got picked throwing his way in the Carolina game, but that's really on Geno. And he pretty much said as such if you watch the Inside the NFL or the NFL Films audio. And then he had a near pick in the Detroit game, near pick 6, actually. And then even on the screen pass, actually, there was a near pick 6 by Thibodeau. But Drew Lock on a rollout threw it reasonably far down the field to Smith-Njigba, and he dropped it. And then another one, there seemed to be a miscommunication of whether Smith-Njigba should have stopped on his route or if he should have kept going. So that pass was off the mark and incomplete. But again, 12 catches for 62 yards. Yeah, those aren't numbers we want to see. That's the Eskridge numbers. And it feels like we're getting flashbacks to the Darrell Bevell unimaginative Percy Harvin plays or the Eskridge playbook that we've seen in the last couple of years. But I don't think Smith-Njigba is to be written off or to be basically discounted so soon. There are just too many circumstances surrounding the offense that have impacted Smith-Njigba negatively. And you also got to consider 2 other things. One, his wrist surgery, which may explain the drop in the Giants game, and the fact that he came back so soon instead of missing time as he was supposed to. He didn't miss a practice even. And also the fact that he missed much of 2022 with a hamstring injury. So he hasn't played a ton of football or practiced a ton over the last year and a half. Can you go back to his college days? So he's got to get back into a groove. And once the offense is closer to having to not go into 12 and 13 out of necessity, perhaps we'll see more targets go Smith-Njigba's way. But I mean, when you have Metcalf and Lockett in front of you and all 3 tight ends are capable pass catchers as well, it's not like you can just spam Smith-Njigba targets for the hell of it. It's just we want to see something more diverse. And one other thing is Jake Bobo, you might have noticed, is getting more and more snaps by the week. And I feel like that is a run blocking thing. Bobo is a really good run blocker, or at least a really willing run blocker. And for as long as Smith-Njigba is dealing with that wrist problem, I think it's better to just have Bobo blocking than Smith-Njigba. So Bobo's presence on the team is actually beneficial in that way, that you're not relying on Smith-Njigba to do as much as he eases back from his injury and as the Seahawks navigate through this path where there's so many injuries impacting how they want to run their offense. So again, patience, just give it time, and hopefully we'll see Smith and Jigba more involved in the offense in a positive way moving forward. And if not this year, there's always next year. This is kind of what happened with Golden Tate. Wasn't involved much in the offense in 2010. He was a second round pick. But in 2011, with Tavares Jackson throwing his way, he started to get steadily more involved in the offense. And then Russell Wilson happened, and then he had his peaks in Detroit. Ideally, Smith-Njigba is still here beyond his rookie contract. Now, Aesthetics in Motion says, by the end of the season, what position group do you think will be the Hawks' greatest strength? That's a pretty good question. Pretty difficult one to answer. I almost want to say the offensive line just because of the depth that we have seen. Because we already know how good Cross and Lucas can be and how good they could be down the line as they gain more experience. And then Evan Brown, I think, has been a really under the radar signing as far as stabilizing the Seahawks offensive line, because it's been a bit of a mess trying to find the ideal center to replace Max Unger. I don't need to tell anybody about the Drew Nowak experience or Patrick Lewis. They got Justin Britt, and Britt was okay. I mean, he was just not the other two. And then after Britt, you had Joey Hunt and then Ethan Posick. I think he could have worked out here. And maybe if it wasn't Mike Solari as the offensive line coach, but he's doing well in Cleveland and good for him. And then Kyle Fuller. Yeah, the less said about the Kyle Fuller experience, the better. But yeah, Evan Brown has been really good. Damian Lewis has been sharp. And then right guard, I like Anthony Bradford's upside. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up replacing Phil Haynes in the starting lineup longer term. And he might have to anyway because of Haynes' calf injury that got re-aggravated. So offensive line, I think, could actually be the strongest position group at the end of the season. But for now, it feels like the best answer is cornerback. And that's because of Woolen and Witherspoon. Just those two alone. You have Woolen already breaking out as a star player in his rookie season, and then we know that he's not getting targeted a whole lot to start this year, as Witherspoon has been. Goff, Dalton, and Jones have all been very willing to throw his way, and he's largely passed the tests. And yes, he's eventually going to get he's going to get his rookie lumps. He already got it in the Detroit game with the flea flicker touchdown. His aggressiveness could be used against him at some points in the season, but I'm willing to live with those mistakes if we get so much of the good stuff that we saw in the Giants game. So you have those two, and then your depth is Trey Brown and Michael Jackson as the outside corners. And Michael Jackson was starting last year, and he was a pretty capable second cornerback. And then Trey Brown, who's had his ups and downs, both with his health and his on-field performance. Ideally, he's back from his concussion after the bye week as well, but he is good depth as well. He could be a starting corner. And then at the nickel spot, I'm not even including Kobe Bryant, who hasn't had the best of starts to this season, and he's injured. But Artie Burns, I think, went above expectations as far as learning the nickel position and playing there. And I don't really see much of a reason for Witherspoon to leave the nickel spot. In other words, let him start in the slot. And if he's got to go outside, then leave him outside, because he's played 100% of the snaps in all three of his games. And this was his first time having to start at nickel. So I think the Seahawks see that versatility in Witherspoon and why they focus on having him play at nickel in training camp. And they see movable chess pieces in ways that they haven't necessarily had with even the best Seahawks corners of the Legion of Boom days. So I actually think that cornerback at the end of the season is going to be the strongest position of depth, because you have two guys who could be in the Pro Bowl or garner Pro Bowl votes for whatever they're worth. And then all the depth below them, they're not game-losing liabilities necessarily. They all have something to offer in a positive way. Dr. Jacko writes, in your history of enemy reactions, would you please put out your personal top 5, 10 screenshots that made you laugh out loud, lose your shit, etc., since it's the anniversary year and all? Off the top of my head, I don't have a photographic memory of these screenshots in the game threads, but there's certainly some classic meltdown videos. I think there was one from the Dallas Cowboys fan. This was Russell Wilson's, the first win of the Russell Wilson era, where the dude just had a fit for the ages after Dallas lost, 27-7. And then any 49ers win, any 49ers win that gets the enemy reaction treatment, it's bound to be a classic because of just how chaotic the Niners Nation comment section can be. And I know that there was one instance where we had a regular Niners Nation reader, might have been Germinator or some. I think that's the username. Directly reference enemy reaction at the end of one of San Francisco's losses to Seattle. This might have been not the second game of 2021. It might have been the first game in Santa Clara in 2021 or one of the games in 2020. But you get the general idea. We've gone meta with this with enemy reaction. I'm so glad that this series has just taken off as a field goal staple. Been doing this for 12 years now, and hopefully there's many more to come throughout the season and seasons to look ahead to. So yeah, enemy reaction. You can just go through the archives. It's up in the navigation bar as well if you want to go through some of the best over the years. But the San Francisco ones and the big market ones too. So like the Giants one, Jets, Dallas, of course. Those normally just are eye popping. And how can I leave out all the content the Denver Broncos have given us, all the site traffic that we have gotten, and all of the just meltdowns of the last year, including into this season. I wanted to lay off of Denver for a bit this year, but I mean, still got a third round pick to send us, whether theirs or New Orleans, and it's just so damn fun. It just really is. These teams used to be division rivals. I don't think anybody's going to get too mad if I lean into Denver a little bit longer, and maybe that could include after Russell Wilson is eventually gone from that team. Or and go Hawks. Doyle, how crazy is it to imagine the Seahawks went into the first matchup with the Niners with a 9-1 record, assuming luck is on our side with respect to getting injured players back, and assuming a fully healthy roster, how much have we closed the talent gap between the playoff loss to the Niners and now? That's a pretty good question. So 9-1, I think, would be crazy. I would be shocked if they're 9-1. They're a top 2, top 3 team. I don't think they're there yet. So let's look at their schedule the next several weeks. At Cincinnati, 1-3, and if Burrow's ankle or if his Achilles goes on him, they're done. Home to Arizona, always a tricky matchup, seemingly regardless of who's the quarterback. Home to Cleveland, throwback day, and then at Baltimore on my birthday, actually, November 5th. Home to the Washington Commanders and their absolutely awful secondary and offensive line giving up sacks for fun, and then at the Los Angeles Rams. So those are the 6 games before taking on the 49ers on Thanksgiving night. I think they would be generally in the 6-4, 7-3 range. And I believe they kind of have to be above 500 at the time, by the time that they play the Niners on Thanksgiving, because that stretch where you got San Francisco twice, Dallas once, and Philadelphia, sometimes the schedule ends up being not what you think it would be. Schedule gets released in May. Wow, that looks like a daunting schedule. And then suddenly it just goes topsy-turvy on you like it really did for the Seahawks last year. In this instance, the schedule is as hard as it looks. Philadelphia is undefeated. San Francisco is undefeated. Dallas is 3-1, and they got still a lethal defense, even with Trayvon Diggs being out for the season. So it's really imperative for Seattle to get these next few games because it's not an easy portion of the schedule, but they should probably be favored. I don't care what Vegas says, but they should probably be favored against Cincinnati and Arizona at the very least. So that's 2 wins to get you to 5. And then it's about finding the 6 and 7 win, and then favored against the Commanders. So Cleveland, Baltimore, and then the Rams, those are the trickier games to me. Beyond, I already mentioned Arizona as the typical tricky divisional matchup, but Baltimore is probably the odds on to win the AFC North. And depending on how things go, unless they just fall apart with injuries again, they could be gunning for the 1 seed in the AFC. Cleveland, I know they're 2-2, and Watson didn't play this last game, so DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson started, and he looked as you would expect for a late-round rookie playing the Ravens defense. So the one good thing for Cleveland, their defense seems legit. Now, Lamar Jackson ripped them up, but also Cleveland's offense did next to nothing that put them in very tough spots. So the Browns defense with Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator, you got Myles Garrett to deal with, our old buddy Shelby Harris. They got a promising secondary. That Cleveland game could be a lot trickier than it looks. So I wouldn't be shocked if they dropped that game. And then Baltimore, again, they're such a well-balanced team that they're gaining their defensive reputation back, and Lamar is playing at a high level. And then, excuse me, the less said about the Rams game, the better, because I know what we're in for, and they just got Cooper Kupp back. So the Cooper Kupp Puka Nacua duo is about to be the new Bruce and Holt. So 9-1, I don't see it, but 7-3 or 6-4, maybe just maybe 8-2 is doable. And I know you mentioned fully healthy roster. Have they closed the talent gap between the January loss of the Niners and now? Marginally at best, because McCaffrey is looking like the best running back in the league. The receiving group is basically as good and if not better than Seattle with Ayuk's development, and then Debo is the Swiss Army knife of violence. Then you have George Kittle too, and I like Jawan Jennings as well. And of what's the Michigan guy's name? Ronnie Bell. So San Francisco's they got a squad on offense, and then on defense, there's not a single pass rusher in Seattle is as good as Nick Bosa, and then a linebacker. Bobby at his best is better than Fred Warner, but this is not 2023 Bobby and 2023 Jordan Brooks. I don't think they match up compared to Fred Warner. He is absolutely outstanding. The secondary is where I think Seattle could have an advantage, and it's where San Francisco is probably at its weakest. But otherwise, San Francisco is still just a better roster, and they would probably be favored to beat Seattle both times in both matchups. But crazier things have happened, and if Seattle keeps improving, then maybe I'll have a different opinion by the time Thanksgiving night comes. Neo Pangea with Big Al Woods gone to the Jets. Which Hawk has the prettiest eyes? Yeah, I put this question in here for a reason. So let me just get myself out of the way and give the proper answer. DJ Dallas, everybody, staring right through your soul. He's staring daggers right through your soul. I think we're getting Iron Eagle again for the Bengals game, so he on CBS. So it's entirely possible that he's going to bring up the DJ Dallas profile pic. I mean, that's just so memeable, if that's a word. It's just hilarious. It really is hilarious. We love you, DJ. Sorry that it looked like it thought you got released on cutdown day. Turns out he was tweeting like a wide receiver, but in reality, he was just probably, not mourning, but saying goodbye to some teammates he'd been playing with over the last several weeks on cutdown day. But DJ's still here, and DJ's actually playing quite well on special teams. All the concerns about him as a kick returner and punt returner might have to put that on the wayside for a little bit. Gazaloa writes, how is Cam Young doing? I think he's doing all right. Now, Cam Young hasn't played a ton of snaps. In fact, he doesn't even have a PFF grade, I believe, yet. For however much you value PFF grades. But with all that said, I noticed he had a tackle for loss against Detroit, and I think it was a run stop. And then against the Giants, he almost had a sack, actually. He got held. They didn't call it. And then Daniel Jones was able to break free and get a 1-yard gain. So if it went for no gain, it would have been Cam Young's first sack. He's getting some penetration into the backfield, and he's just being a good rotational contributor, much in the way Miles Adams is when you get lower into the depth chart. And I think that's about as good as you can ask for a fourth-round rookie, especially somebody who missed so much of training camp and preseason, or at least so much of preseason with his calf injury. I mean, not every draft pick, whether through the first round or the seventh round and through the undrafted, is meant to be some sort of superstar in the making. Sometimes you just need draft picks to be good rotational players. I think Cameron Young fits the bill at the moment. So if he keeps developing, more power to him. And it's kind of the ideal, I've been saying that word a lot, it's kind of the optimal outcome for the Seahawks, given all the question marks about how they were going to approach the interior of this defensive line, coupled with the fact that they didn't draft Jalen Carter. And incidentally, I'm so glad that Devin Witherspoon is playing the way he has, because it can give us a break from should have drafted Jalen Carter, should have drafted. It's been every week, especially in our comment section, but I get it on social media as well. Maybe it's possible that both Witherspoon and Jalen Carter are very, very good players, and both teams will benefit, both Philadelphia and Seattle. Blaze 57 writes, looking forward to Adams, Witherspoon, and Woolen on the field at the same time. Is this the Legion of Boom all over again? Witherspoon and Adams absolutely hit hard. They're all smart and fast. seems like a sleeping giant the NFL might be overlooking. Well, the last time we did the Legion of Boom 2.0 thing was when Adams came here in the trade, and Griffin and Flowers were still the starting cornerbacks, and then of course Quandre Diggs was already here, and needless to say, Legion of Boom 2.0 did not take off. Now, in this instance, Adams has several more injuries on his ledger, and then Diggs is now approaching 30. I think he's already 30, with a catastrophic injury just 2 years behind him. And then you have Woolen and Witherspoon replacing Griffin and Flowers. Still, it's abundantly clear that at a minimum, Woolen is an upgrade over Griffin, who I still root for, and he's playing out in Houston, and I guess he's the starting quarterback right now. And then for Witherspoon, I know it's just a few games, but the productivity speaks for itself. He's active in run support. He's active getting after the quarterback. I mean, they probably blitzed him more times than we've seen the Seahawks blitz their corners in the Legion of Boom days. They didn't blitz Richard Sherman a lot, and they certainly didn't blitz Byron Maxwell or Browner a ton. Certainly as the years progressed. With Witherspoon, you really can do everything with him. You can play him on the outside, you can play him on the slot, you can play him as a blitzer. It just unlocks so many things, exciting things about the Seahawks defense. So Legion of Boom 2.0, I wouldn't go there just yet because of the unknowns of how Adams is going to play several weeks at a time. Hopefully he can not get injured and not get concussed in this next game. And then with Diggs, how many more years does he have left? Because safeties, generally, you don't see safeties playing deep into their 30s. So there are going to be successor plans. And of course, there is a possibility if Adams gets hurt again, Seattle takes a long, hard look at their contract and wonder, can they do something about Adams' future in the team? Same with the fact that Diggs, I don't think, has too many years left on his deal either. They've tied up a lot of money to those safeties. But think about the original Legion of Boom, and it started with the safeties and then went to the corners. They drafted Earl Thomas and they drafted Cam Chancellor, and Cam eventually replaced Lawyer Malloy. The corners at the time, I think, were Kelly Jennings and Marcus Trufant. And then by the end of 2011, it became Earl, Cam, Sherman, and then Browner. And just having those two corners, even though Browner had a pretty brutal start when he was in Seattle, it totally transformed the defense. So maybe we're seeing something in reverse where it's starting with these corners in Reek and Devin. And then even if it doesn't necessarily transform into Legion of Boom 2.0 with Adams and Diggs back there, maybe Jarek Reed can be the Diggs replacement down the line, or maybe they find a safety in the draft or wherever, who ends up being another part of the building blocks for Legion of Boom 2.0. We'll see. I don't think they're quite there yet, but certainly at the cornerback level, like I said, I think this could be the best position group on the team. And I think I'm going to be proven right at the end. I'm wrong a lot. Most of us don't know anything, even though we pretend to know everything. I can assure you I'm wrong more often than I'm right, but I think I'm onto something with the cornerback group, and I'm not being a homer. And then lastly, is this closer to a 2012 or 2013 in your book, says Baldwin's Ghost, or is it just a 2008 or 2009 in disguise? So 2008, 2009, those were ugly years. 4-12 in Holmgren's last year, 5-11 in Jim Moore's 1 year, which led to hiring Pete Carroll. 2012, year one of Russ, made it to the divisional round, almost made it to the NFC Championship game. Who knows if Washington's field wasn't such garbage, Chris Clemens would have been healthy and they would have had the pass rush to harass Matt Ryan and beat Atlanta anyway. And then 2013, pretty good, to quote Larry David, got a Super Bowl out of it. Just by default, it can't be 2008 or 2009 in disguise. 2008 and 2009 teams were just so devoid of talent that it necessitated Carolyn Schneider having to completely uproot the team and get rid of so many people, and why Field Goals flipped its lid when we traded guys like Darryl Tapp. But with this roster, there's so much young talent, and they're not all necessarily going to be great players. They can just be decent or good. You need all three levels. You have great players, you have good and decent. You just prefer not to have total liabilities on the roster, but it's going to happen. But look how young this team is, other than a quarterback, really, on the offensive side of the ball. And Gino's going to be 33 in a few days, so happy birthday, Gino. And then you've got young running backs like Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet, and you're going to have them under contract together for at least 3 more seasons. counting this one. And then at wide receiver, DK's 25, Lockett's on the other side at 30, but Smith-Njigba's 21. And Jake Bobo, who's going to get more involved in the offense as you would assume. He's an old rookie, but still 25 is 25. And Derek Young, if he's back off IR, maybe he can contribute. He's in his 20s. He's in his second year. And then the offensive line, Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, second-year players. Damian Lewis, fourth year. Anthony Bradford, rookie. And I think he'll be the starter down the line, whether Haynes is on the team or not in 2024. And then center, Evan Brown, he's in his 20s. And then Oluwatimi is a rookie. So you're looking at a lot of guys on rookie deals or just entering their second contracts. And that's really, really exciting. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you have, as I mentioned, Mafe and Hall. I don't know about Darrell Taylor at this point. It's a contract year for him, and there's still time to think about re-signing him, but at this point, I wouldn't be shocked to see Seattle moved on from him. Then at linebacker, Bobby is up there in age, but he'll certainly be playing at least another year or two, I suspect. And then Jordan Brooks is entering his contract year. So even beyond Bobby, they're probably going to be looking at other linebackers and creating another duo there, perhaps. And then in the secondary, we've already gone through it. The safeties might be getting up there, but on the outside or on the cornerback spots, you have Woolen and Witherspoon, and then Trey Brown as well. And Mike Jackson's pretty young, and Kobe's still pretty young. The list goes on and on. I even forgot to mention back on the offensive side of the ball, the tight ends. And Will Dissly's is in the second year of his 3-year deal, and really the concern with him is his health and his injury history. But still, when he's healthy, he's a valuable blocking and receiving tight end. Noah Fant has really stepped it up these past 2 weeks as a receiver, and he's the yak monster that the Seahawks have so desperately needed. And then Colby Parkinson, contract year for him. They probably won't keep all 3 tight ends next year. I would like them to, but they all have some level of value and contribution on the team, and they're all in their 20s too. So hell, I could go to special teams and Michael Dixon being in his 5th or 6th year in the league. And you have an undrafted free agent, long snapper who's a rookie. So there are so many players under the age of 30 or who are in their 1st or 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th year on this roster that are going to be part of this team, you would suspect, for years to come. And that's even if Pete Carroll is not necessarily the head coach in, say, 3 or 4 years' time. And that, to me, is the most exciting part of the Seahawks squad. It doesn't feel tuckered out like the 2017 team when they traded Bennett and they fired the coaching staffs, Bevel and Cable and Chris Richard, or the 2021 team where eventually, Wilson got traded, and then they made some other moves with the roster and other moves with the coaching staff. So that's when it was more like 2008 or 2009, especially the 2017 team where the Legion of Boom just slowly dissolved. They slowly broke down. And then just the way that they were running the offense with patchwork offensive linemen was so unacceptable. And you get the deal at this point in time of the fact that those 2 teams didn't make the playoffs. Incidentally, by the way, I should bring up Andy Dickerson to wrap this up. To me, he is the best outside hire that Pete Carroll has made as an assistant coach. So you might be going, well, what about Gus Bradley or Dan Quinn? Well, technically Dan Quinn, I guess, because they had to rehire him from Florida, but he inherited Bradley and Quinn from Jim Mora's staff. He retained them from 2010, and then Quinn left, and then he came back. But Dickerson was a straight outside hire after Mike Solari was let go. And the fact that the Seahawks offensive line has been so good with both the starting group and managing to get through this little window of backups, having to play so many snaps. That is a major credit to Dickerson for what he's done with the pass protection and the run blocking. The running game has been quite efficient. It hasn't necessarily been explosive in the way that Miami's rushing offense is, but still it's pretty effective, and I think it will get better over time. Dickerson, I think kudos to him. Assistant Coach of the Year is a thing that the AP does at the NFL awards, and they normally give it to offensive or defensive coordinators. Why not give it to Andy Dickerson at this rate? He should get something. He has been absolutely outstanding, and I hope that the Seahawks are able to keep him around for a little while longer because he has absolutely earned his money. All right, so on that note, we're going to call this a wrap. This is where you can follow us on social media and then on fieldgoals.com, of course. Twitter/X at Field Goals. Facebook is just Field Goals. You could type it in the URL, just don't put in the space. And then this YouTube channel link, we have 3 iterations of the Field Goals YouTube channel, and this is the 3rd one. If I ever get a hold of the one that is managed by SB Nation again, then I'll migrate these videos over there, and then everything can be consolidated properly. But in the meantime, we'll still have content through the bye week and then previewing the Bengals game next week. We'll do another Q&A at the end of the month, and I'm unsure if that's going to be a video or in written form, but whatever the case, we're going to try and do 2 of these a month. So thanks again for everybody who submitted their questions. Thanks again for watching this. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that jazz. I won't be too annoying about it. And then we'll see you back on the main site over at fieldgoals.com. So have a good evening, have a good weekend, and go Hawks.